So, if you were to walk into the home office of the average person right now, someone who is genuinely trying to turn their life around, maybe they're trying to launch a startup or write a novel or even just get physically fit,
Right.
you are almost guaranteed to see the exact same artifact hanging on the wall.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. The vision board.
The vision board. Yeah, the collage. It's the magazine cut out of the tropical beach, the person with the six-pack abs, the bestseller list, maybe the dream car.
Hmm.
It's colorful, it's highly aspirational, and it is pretty much the centerpiece of modern self-help. And according to the massive stack of documentation and research we have on the desk for today's deep dive, it is fundamentally broken.
It is. In fact, the source material we're looking at today argues that the vision board isn't just useless, it's actively detrimental.
Actively detrimental. That's a strong claim.
Yeah, it suggests that by fixating on the image of the result, you're actually preventing the engineering required to get there in the first place.
Right, because it assumes life is this perfectly linear path, like step 1, step 2, step 3, boom, prize.
Exactly. But the material we're diving into today argues that the self does not work like a brick wall where you just linearly stack bricks. It works like an ecosystem.
An ecosystem.
Right. And if you try to build a complex life using linear tools like a basic checklist or a vision board, you are going to fail. And not because you lack willpower, but because you're completely ignoring the physics of the system.
The physics of the system. That is the phrase that really hooked me in the introduction to all this, like the physics of the self. Because we aren't discussing abstract motivation today.
No, definitely.
We aren't talking about, manifesting or just getting the right vibes. We are looking at something called the root square chart.
Yes, the root square chart.
And I have to say, looking at the diagrams in the source material, this does not look like a self-help book.
Not at all.
It looks like an engineering schematic or like a circuit board for a computer or something.
That is the perfect visual for it, honestly, because it is an architecture. The core premise here is that we need to move away from wishful thinking and move toward what the author calls variable determination.
Variable determination.
Yeah. It's a rigorous mathematical process of defining the actual forces in your life. Forces that, frankly, usually go completely unnamed for most people.
Right.
And once you determine those variables, you move to linguistic resolution, which is essentially writing the code that governs those forces.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think a lot of people listening probably feel like they are organized. They have the checklist. They have the color-coded Google Calendar.
Sure.
But this root score concept starts with a pretty aggressive idea called the foundational inversion. It basically says everything we currently think about goal setting is backwards.
It is backwards. And the reason it's backwards is because we almost always start with the root.
The root being the end goal.
Exactly. In this system, the root is the center of the chart. It's the ultimate result. So we say, I want to be a writer. That's the root. And then what do? We try to work backward from that identity. We try to just act like a writer.
Right. We buy the nice notebook. We go to the coffee shop.
Exactly. But the root square chart demands the exact opposite approach. It posits a really simple, hard truth. You cannot build the root. You physically cannot touch it.
Now that sounds totally counterintuitive, because if I want to be a writer, shouldn't I focus on being a writer?
No, because the root is emergent. Think of it like an actual tree, which is obviously where the name comes from. You cannot go outside and just build a tree's canopy.
Right.
You can't staple leaves to a wooden trunk and expect them to grow.
It's just a decoration at that point.
Exactly. The canopy is a byproduct. It is the emergent result of a healthy root system, very specific soil chemistry, adequate hydration, photosynthesis. If you focus on the canopy, you are focusing on a ghost. You're targeting the smoke instead of the fire.
So the mission of this deep dive today is to really figure out how to build the fire.
Yes. We are going to deconstruct the anatomy of this chart. We'll look at the roots, the branches, the leaves, and the fruits. But even before we get to drawing boxes, we have to look at the capacity of your engine.
Right, the math part.
We're going to learn how to calculate something called silhouette allocation.
Which sounds like a term from a Cold War spy thriller, honestly.
It really does.
But looking at the math here in the sources, it's actually a terrifying reality check about how much time and energy we actually possess.
It is the step most people completely skip. It's the brutal math that tells you if your dream is structurally possible or if you are essentially hallucinating.
Wow.
And finally, toward the end, we're going to talk about the position of one, which is how you insert your own agency into that math. It decides whether you are controlling your habits or if your habits are actually controlling you.
I love it. So let's jump right into the structure first so you, the listener, can visualize what we're actually talking about. So imagine a perfect square.
A perfect square.
This is the boundary of your life, and it's divided into 4 quadrants. Walk us through the anatomy of the root square chart.
Okay, visualize the square. Dead center, right in the middle, you have the root. As we just said, this represents the emergent whole. It represents 100% of the value of the chart, but it is totally empty at the start.
Okay, empty.
Right. And it's both a noun and a verb. So if your root is writer, it is also the physical act of writing. It is the identity and the action completely fused together. But again, you can't touch it.
So the center is the destination, but it's hands-off. What are the 4 quadrants surrounding it?
Those are the branches. There are exactly 4. In the specific system we're looking at, which uses a case study called Ship the Book, these branches are named power, presence, purpose, and proclivity.
Power, presence, purpose, proclivity. Okay.
Yes. Each branch represents roughly 25% of the total architecture. These are your capability domains.
Let's define those really quickly, because a word like power can mean a lot of different things. Are we talking about like physical strength, political influence? What is power here?
In this specific context, power is execution capacity.
Okay.
It is your raw horsepower. Can you actually do the work? Can you physically sit in the chair and grind it out?
Got it. And presence.
Presence is your sensory awareness. Are you grounded in reality, or are you constantly dissociating into your phone or living in your anxieties about the future?
I feel attacked.
We all do.
Okay.
Then there's purpose. Purpose is the directional architecture. It's the why. It's the compass that keeps you moving when the motivation fades.
And the last one, proclivity.
Proclivity is your natural bent. It's the way you instinctively move through the world. You could call it your talent stack or your natural advantages.
And the argument the source makes is that you absolutely need all 4 to support the root.
Correct. And this acts as a massive diagnostic tool right off the bat. Most people lean way too heavily into 1 or 2 of these.
Like having an imbalance.
Exactly. Let's say you have all purpose. You have a burning desire to write this book. You know exactly why it matters to the world.
But you have 0 power.
Right. You have no execution capacity. You can't sit still for 20 minutes. And maybe you have 0 presence, so you're constantly distracted by social media.
So you're just a dreamer with a really good idea who never ships anything.
Precisely. You will never ship the book. But conversely, look at the opposite. Let's say you have massive power. You can grind for 18 hours a day on pure discipline.
The hustle culture archetype.
Exactly. But you have no purpose and no presence. What happens? You are just a highly efficient machine driving 100 miles an hour straight off a cliff. You achieve things, but you burn out completely because the direction is empty.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Ooh.
So we have the root in the center and the 4 branches radiating out.
Mm-hmm.
But the branches act as containers for the next layer down, right?
Right. It's a spatial hierarchy. Root goes to branches. Branches break down into leaves. Yes. There are exactly 3 leaves per branch. So 12 leaves total in the entire system. A leaf represents a functional state. Think of a leaf as a syndicate of habits.
The syndicate of habits. So a cluster of behaviors that work together to create a broader state of being.
Exactly, like metabolic health or deep focus.
But, and I think this is where the rubber really meets the road in this methodology, you can't even do a leaf.
No, you can't.
Like, I can't just wake up on a Tuesday and decide to do metabolic health. That's still way too vague.
It's way too vague, and that is why vision boards fail. They stop at the leaf level or even the branch level. You have to go deeper. The leaves break down into the absolute atoms of the chart, which are the fruits.
The fruits, and the math here is beautifully consistent. 3 fruits per leaf.
Yes. 3 fruits per leaf, 12 leaves total across 4 branches. So that leaves us with exactly 36 fruits in a completed chart.
36.
And this next point is the most critical definition in the entire system. A fruit must be absolutely atomic.
Define atomic in this context, because I think this is exactly where the standard Monday morning to-do list completely fails us.
Atomic means irreducible. It is the smallest possible unit of action. And crucially, it must require 0 cognitive load to decipher.
0 cognitive load.
If you have to think about how to start the action, it is not a fruit. It's still a project.
The source material gives a really scathing but accurate example of this regarding the gym.
It really goes after the gym resolution, because most people put go to the gym on their habit tracker, or they paste a picture of a gym on their vision board.
Right.
In the root square system, go to the gym is not a fruit. That is a highly complex project disguised as a task.
Because of the friction.
Yes, think about the immense friction involved in going to the gym. First, you have to find your gym clothes. Then you have to find your water bottle. You have to find your car keys. You have to navigate traffic. You have to find parking.
Then you have to scan your tag at the front desk, find an open locker, change your clothes.
It's a massive cascade of micro decisions. And if you are tired, if your power is low that day, any single one of those steps can stop you cold.
Right. You can't find your left shoe and you just say, forget it, I'm not going.
Exactly. It requires what chemists call activation energy at every single step. If your willpower is depleted, the complexity of the task kills the habit.
So what is the fruit version of that goal?
The fruit version is put on running shoes immediately upon waking.
That's it. Just put on the shoes.
That is it. That is the entire fruit. It is binary. You either did it or you didn't. It takes maybe 5 seconds. It requires zero cognitive load.
But how does putting on shoes get you fit?
Here is the physics of it. The data shows that if you simply put the running shoes on your feet, you are statistically 90% more likely to actually leave the house and exercise.
Because you've already started the physical momentum.
Right. You do not focus on the fitness, which is the leaf. You focus on the shoes, the fruit. The core insight here is that the chart works via synthesis. If you tend the atoms, the molecules literally take care of themselves.
I really, really like that distinction. But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
I can sit down right now and list 36 atomic fruits.
Right.
Drink a glass of water, do 10 push-ups, read 10 pages of a book, meditate for 2 minutes, floss my teeth.
Sure.
If I try to do all 36 of those completely new things tomorrow, I am going to physically collapse.
You absolutely will. You'd likely burn out within 3 days.
Right.
And this is the trap of what the author calls fantasy planning. We assume we have infinite capacity. We assume we have boundless energy as long as we just drink enough coffee. And that brings us to part 2 of the framework, silhouette allocation.
Silhouette allocation. This is the quiet engine running behind the map. This is where we have to stop the fantasy planning and start doing the actual physics of our life.
Exactly, because this introduces a hard, unbreakable constraint, the 100 units.
The 100 units constraint. Walk us through this.
This is the absolute rule of the system. You have exactly 100 units of capacity. Period. No more.
And this isn't just a metaphor for the hours in a week.
No, it's not just time. It is a capacity currency. It compresses your time, your physical energy, your financial resources, your emotional attention, and your cognitive bandwidth into a single unified metric. You have 100 units to spend in a given week.
And once they're gone, they're gone.
They're gone. The bank is empty.
The source material uses this Ship the Book case study, which I found so painfully relatable. Let's walk through this traveler's audit, as they call it.
It is a really painful audit to read because we all do this. So this person, the traveler, wants to write a book in 12 months. They sit down to map out what the author calls their raw reality week.
Okay.
So first, they have a full-time job. Physically, that's 40 hours a week. But because the job is high stress and involves managing people, it doesn't just cost 40 units. It costs maybe 60 units of attention and energy.
Right, because you come home and you're still thinking about that email you got at 4 p.m. You're
Yeah.
drained.
Exactly. Then they trek to sleep.
Which you can't negotiate with.
Right. Sleep is roughly 56 hours a week. That is non-negotiable biology. If you cut that, the machine literally breaks down. So that's 56 units right there.
And then there's just the fiction of staying alive.
Yeah, life admin. Commuting to work, grocery shopping, cooking, paying the electric bill, doing the laundry, cleaning the house. That's another massive chunk.
And then relationships.
Right. Time with a partner, taking care of kids, occasionally seeing friends so you don't become a total hermit.
And let's not forget the phone.
Digital drift.
Mm.
The time spent scrolling on social media, checking the news, watching random YouTube videos, just existing online to decompress.
So they add all this up. And when they finally did the math for this audit,
When they mapped their lived silhouette, the actual shape of how they spent their life, it came out to 128 units.
oof, 128.
Yes.
So they're actively trying to fit 128 units of reality into a container that physically only holds 100 units.
Exactly. And this is the massive aha moment of the whole book. This person was beating themselves up every single day for not writing their novel. They thought it was a moral failure. They thought they were just lazy or lacked willpower.
Right, I just don't want it badly enough.
Yes. But the silhouette allocation proved it was actually a structural impossibility. You physically cannot fit 128 units into 100. It is a lot of physics. The system will collapse.
And usually it collapses by stealing from the most vulnerable categories, right?
Exactly. It steals from the sleep variable, or it steals from the health variable, or the marriage variable.
So if I'm listening to this and realizing my life is currently sitting at 130 units, how do I fix that? Because I can't just quit my job tomorrow, and I obviously can't stop sleeping.
Right. You perform what is called the three-column audit. This is your primary diagnostic tool. You literally make 3 columns on a piece of paper.
Okay, 3 columns.
Column 1 is current. Where did your 100 units actually go last week? And you have to be brutally honest here. If you spent 15 units binge watching a show on Netflix, you write it down. You don't hide it.
The numbers don't lie.
They don't. Column 2 is necessary. What is the absolute bare minimum needed to keep your system from collapsing?
So paying rent, buying groceries.
Yes. And maybe you can't quit your job, but can you do your job with 80% intensity instead of 110% intensity? Can you act your wage, so to speak, to save 10 units of energy for yourself? That goes in the necessary column.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Reducing the energetic footprint of a necessary task.
Exactly. And then you have column 3,
Which,
optimal. What is required to actually achieve the transformation you want? To achieve the root? How many units does writing this book actually cost per week?
and then the diagnostic is just simple math.
Simple math. If your necessary column plus your optimal column is greater than 100,
You are broke,
you are broken. The plan is invalid. You are hallucinating.
so you have to cut things out.
You have to be ruthless. You have to kill certain darlings. But sometimes, let's be real, even after you cut the fat, you are still sitting at 110 units. You just have a lot of genuine demands in your life. Kids, aging parents, a demanding career.
Right. So what then? Are you just doomed to never achieve the root?
No. That is where the source introduces a concept called the burst transformer.
The burst transformer. Now, I really liked this concept when I was reading it, but I have to admit, it also sounded kind of exhausting. It's basically telling us that work-life balance is a complete myth, right?
In the short term, yes, balance is a lie. You cannot run your system at 110% indefinitely. That's a biological fact. But you can systematically cycle your focus.
Cycle it.
Yes. A burst transformer is a strategy where you say, okay, for the next 8 weeks, I'm going to intentionally over-allocate to the purpose branch. I'm going to write this book.
But those units have to come from somewhere.
Exactly. So you say, I am going to steal units from the social branch. I am going to steal units from the housekeeping branch.
So my house gets incredibly messy, and I literally don't see my friends for 2 months. Is that actually healthy?
It is healthy if and only if you schedule the recovery. That is the critical, non-negotiable component of a burst transformer.
Okay.
You have to say, after these 8 weeks are up, I switch the allocation, I significantly under-allocate the writing, and I over-allocate the social and recovery branches.
So the average over the course of the whole year is 100 units, but the lived day-to-day experience is these intense bursts of progress followed by deliberate planned recovery.
Precisely. It's oscillation. It's like a heartbeat.
A heartbeat. I love that.
A flat line on a heart monitor means you're dead. A heartbeat goes up and down. You have to design the up and the down. If you don't actively design the recovery phase, your body will eventually force it on you.
Usually in the form of catching a terrible flu or having a breakdown.
Exactly. Your body will take the units back by force.
So once we have our capacity sorted out, we've found our 100 units, we've cut the fat, we have to decide what actually goes into the chart. We have to determine our variables, and this brings us right into part 3, variable determination.
Right. And we need to redefine what a variable is. In standard middle school algebra, X is just a placeholder, right? It can be literally anything.
Right.
But in mathematics, which is the mathematical philosophy this chart is based on, a variable is something very specific. It is a named pattern of reality.
A named pattern of reality. It's a profound way to phrase it.
It is. And here is the golden rule of variable determination. If you cannot fund a variable in your silhouette allocation, it is not a variable. It is a fantasy.
So if you boldly write novel for 2 hours a day on your chart,
Yeah.
but you haven't mathematically allocated those 15 units of time and energy to actually do it, it's just a decoration.
It's worse than a decoration. It's a lie you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
But the flip side is also true. We often miss massive variables that are already heavily operating in our lives. The source talks about these as the invisible giants.
Invisible giants. Sleep is the classic example here, really.
Yes. Most people treat sleep like it's a void, like it's just the absence of doing things.
Just a pause button.
Exactly. But if sleep takes up 30% of your entire lived silhouette, which it absolutely does, then sleep must be a recognized variable on your chart. You cannot ignore the biggest physical forces in your life. You have to name them so you can actively manage them.
Which leads us to what might be the most fascinating part of the entire framework, the core formula of the episode, the iterator and the delineator. This is the A over B logic.
Yes.
I really want to spend some time here because this is where the physics analogy really crystallizes for me.
This is the engine room of the whole philosophy. The formula is expressed as a simple fraction, A divided by B.
Okay, so if you're listening, visualize a fraction, a top number and a bottom number, A over B.
Right. The top position, the numerator, is called the iterator. This is the content of your action. It's the fuel, the raw force.
So give me some examples of an iterator.
Things like creativity, ambition, physical effort, or even emotions like anger or love. It is the raw material. It is the what.
Got it. And the bottom position.
The denominator is the delineator. This is the context, the filter, the constraint that you put the raw material through.
Like what?
Like time, budget, a set of rules, or emotional constraints like fear or expectation. The delineator is the how.
And the really crucial physics rule here, the source stresses this repeatedly, is that influence flows upward.
Upward. Yes, this is everything. In this math, the denominator shapes the numerator. The context completely dictates the shape of the content. Think of it like a liquid. The container you pour it into dictates the shape of the liquid.
Let's use a really concrete example so people can visualize this. How about creative output over time window?
Perfect. So creative output is your iterator. It's on top. Time window is your delineator. It's on the bottom.
Right.
The math here says your raw creativity is actively being shaped, squeezed, and defined by the time window you pour it into.
Okay, so if my time window is 10 minutes,
If the time window is 10 minutes, your creativity takes a very specific compressed shape. Maybe it becomes a quick sketch, or a haiku, or a bulleted list.
but if the time window is 6 months,
Then the creativity takes a totally different shape. It becomes a deeply researched essay or an oil painting. The raw force, your creativity didn't change. The container changed.
that makes total sense. But what happens when we have forces acting on us that we aren't consciously aware of? This was a slightly spooky part of the text. They introduced these things called shadow variables.
Yes, shadow variables. In the notation, these are written inside angle brackets.
Shadow variables, what are they exactly?
They are massive forces that are actively acting on your equation, but you haven't named them yet. They are invisible delineators.
Okay, give me an example of an invisible force.
Let's say you're trying to write. You've cleared your schedule. You have the raw talent. So the equation in your head is talent divided by time.
Talent over time. Simple.
It should work flawlessly. The math says you should be producing pages, but you aren't. You're sitting there completely frozen, just staring at a blinking cursor on a blank screen.
So the equation is broken.
No, the equation is never broken. It's just incomplete. There is a shadow variable secretly hiding in the denominator.
And what would that be?
It's usually something deeply psychological, something like perfectionism or fear of judgment. So your real operating equation isn't talent divided by time, it's talent divided by time plus fear.
Wow.
And that invisible fear is artificially bloating the denominator. It is diluting the force of your talent to zero.
So variable determination, this whole process we're doing, is really about becoming a detective in your own life.
Oh.
Hunting down these shadows and dragging them into the light.
Exactly, because once you name the fear, you can remove the angle brackets. It just becomes a regular manageable variable.
And once it's a regular variable, you can do math with it.
Exactly. You can strategize around it. You can look at your chart and say, okay, my fear variable is testing really high today. So to balance the equation, I need to increase the time window constraint to take the pressure off. Or I need to add a new variable called support system to the numerator.
Right.
You can do math with a named variable. You cannot do math with a ghost.
I love that. You cannot do math with a ghost. Which brings us perfectly to part 4, linguistic resolution. This is the process of how we take those ghosts, those shadows, and turn them into mathematical laws. And it revolves around the single most powerful symbol in this entire methodology.
The position of 1.
The position of 1. Now, we have to clarify right away. 1 here is not just the number 1.
No, it's not a digit. In mathematics, 1 represents the unity operator.
The unity operator, which means what?
It represents the self. It represents your conscious agency. It is you.
Okay.
And where you physically place the one in the fraction determines who is ultimately in charge of the behavior.
This part completely blew my mind when I read it. The profound difference between x over 1 and 1 over x.
It changes everything about how we view habits. Let's look at configuration A first.
Which is x over 1.
Right. So the variable, let's call it x, is on the top position. The 1, which is you, is on the bottom position.
And we remember the rule. The bottom shapes the top. The denominator shapes the numerator.
Exactly. So if you are on the bottom, that means you are the delineator. You are the context. You are actively shaping x.
Okay, give me a concrete example so we can ground this.
Let's use walking. The equation is walking divided by 1.
Walking over 1.
In linguistic resolution, this translates to, I am wielding the act of walking.
Wielding it like a tool.
Yes. You are using walking to achieve a specific end. You decide exactly when to walk, you decide how fast you're going to walk, and you know exactly why you are walking. You are the absolute master of the habit.
So it's like saying, I'm going to power walk for 20 minutes on the treadmill to burn exactly 150 calories.
Yes, that is wielding. That is highly controlled.
Okay. Now flip the fraction. Configuration B.
Configuration B is 1 over x.
So 1u is on top, and the variable x is on the bottom.
Right. And since the bottom dictates the top, now x is the delineator. X is the context. X is actively shaping you.
So 1 over walking.
This means I am yielding to the walk.
Yielding.
I am voluntarily submitting to the process of walking. I am stepping out the door and letting the physical rhythm of the walk change my internal state.
Like saying, I'm incredibly stressed, I'm just going to go walk in the woods until I feel better.
Yes. You aren't tracking your heart rate. You aren't counting steps. The walk is the container, and you are the liquid being poured into it. The walk governs you.
That is such a profound distinction, because in standard habit advice, we usually just think doing a habit is doing a habit, a walk is a walk. But you're saying the underlying power dynamic of the fraction changes the entire chemical outcome of the habit.
It alters it completely. Think about your smartphone.
Oh, this is a dangerous one.
It's the best example. Phone over 1 means I am wielding the phone. I am picking it up to send one specific email, and then I'm putting it down. I am in complete control.
But 1 over phone.
1 over phone means I am yielding to the device. I am lying on the couch, scrolling through a doom newsfeed, and I am letting the algorithm actively reshape my neurochemistry and my mood. The phone is in charge of me.
Wow. And if we look at our silhouette allocation, we probably spend a terrifying amount of our lives in 1 over phone mode.
We absolutely do. We are constantly unconsciously yielding, and that is why the chart teaches us about the concept of the inversion kick.
The inversion kick.
Because you cannot live your entire life in wielding mode. You can't always be x over 1.
Why not? Isn't control good?
It's good, but it requires massive cognitive load. If you are always driving, always controlling, always tracking every macro and every minute, you will inevitably reach total exhaustion.
Right. You become rigid and break.
But on the flip side, you cannot always live in yielding mode. You can't always be 1 over x.
Because then you just drift.
Exactly. You become a weather vane. You just react to whatever external forces happen to blow your way.
So the goal isn't to pick one or the other. The goal is to oscillate.
Yes. You deliberately design the alternation. You can even do it within the same activity.
Really? How does that work?
Take running a marathon. You might say, for the first 10 miles, I am in charge. Running over 1, I am tightly monitoring my pace, my hydration, my form.
Highly controlled.
But then, for the middle 10 miles, you hit the inversion kick. You yield. 1 over running. You let the rhythm of your feet take over. You let your mind wander. You enter a flow state where the run is running you.
That is called the autonomous variable state, right? Where you have the agency to choose when to wield and when to yield.
Exactly. True agency isn't about always being in control. It's about consciously choosing when to surrender control to a system you trust.
Okay, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So we've got the atoms are fruits. We've got our capacity mapped out with the silhouette. We've defined our variables with iterators and delineators. We've named our shadow variables. And we understand our agency with the position of 1.
We have all the pieces.
Now we have to actually put it all together on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the math gets a little weird again. We move to part 5, synthesis. When you look at the root square chart, you don't see standard plus signs connecting the fruits. The symbol is a plus sign with a circle drawn all the way around it.
Yes, that is the synthesis operator.
Why use a special symbol? Why
Yeah.
not just use a regular plus sign? Doesn't A plus B just equal A and B?
No, and that is exactly the problem with traditional thinking. A regular plus sign implies simple addition. If I have a pile of red bricks and I add a pile of blue bricks, what do I have?
A bigger pile of mixed brick.
Exactly. The fundamental nature of the bricks didn't change. That is addition. But synthesis is not addition. Synthesis is chemistry.
Chemistry.
Think about water. If I take 2 molecules of hydrogen and I synthesize them with 1 molecule of oxygen, I don't just get a cloudy mixture of hydrogen-oxygen.
No, you get H2O. You get water.
Right. I get a wet liquid substance that actively puts out fires. And I created it from 2 completely invisible gases that are highly explosive.
That is incredible when you frame it like that.
That is synthesis. It creates a completely new emergent property that did not exist in any of the individual parts.
And the source material uses a really famous ecological example to illustrate this.
Mhm.
The Yellowstone wolves.
It is the ultimate real-world example of synthesis. Back in the 1990s, they reintroduced gray wolves to Yellowstone National Park to help balance the ecosystem.
Because there were too many deer, right?
Right, but they didn't just add wolves. The math wasn't park plus wolves equals park with wolves.
What happened?
A chain reaction of synthesis. The wolves started hunting the deer. Because the deer were being hunted, they stopped grazing lazily on the exposed riverbanks. Because the deer moved out of the valleys, the willow trees and the aspen trees along the rivers suddenly started to grow back in massive numbers.
The vegetation returned.
And because the trees grew back, the beavers returned because they had wood to eat and build with.
Wow.
The beavers built dams. The dams created deep water ponds. The ponds brought back ducks and otters and fish and amphibians.
Just cascades.
But here is the craziest part. The roots of all those new trees physically stabilized the loose soil of the riverbanks. So the rivers literally stopped meandering. They locked into place and ran straighter and deeper.
Wait, so adding wolves changed the actual physical geography of the rivers?
Yes, wolves synthesized with ecosystem equaled new geography. That is the power of emergence.
So bringing this all the way back to the Reed Squared chart, applying this to the self, if I synthesize a fruit-like discipline with a fruit-like rest, I don't just get a person who is tired but working hard.
No. You get a completely new state. You get sustainable high performance. You get a state of being where the work feels completely different. And this leads us to what the author calls the 4th quarter principle.
Right. Because if we look at the math of a leaf, we have 3 fruits per leaf.
Exactly, 3 named elements. But the math in the book says those 3 elements only account for 75% of the outcome.
Which begs the obvious question, where is the other 25%?
The remaining 25% is the overlap. It is the invisible 4th quarter. It is the synthesis itself. It is the absolute magic that happens between the fruits when they interact.
Can you give an example of a 4th quarter emerging?
Sure. Let's say your 3 atomic fruits for a specific leaf are study for 20 minutes, practice the chords, and review the mistakes.
Okay. Study, practice, review. That's 75%.
The 4th quarter that emerges from synthesizing those 3 isn't written on the chart. The 4th quarter is mastery. You cannot schedule mastery. You cannot put due mastery on a to-do list. Mastery emerges when the other 3 synthesize.
This connects perfectly back to what we said at the very beginning of the deep dive. You cannot target the root. You can't touch the canopy. You can only tend to the atomic fruits. The root is the ultimate synthesis.
Exactly. You tend to the wolves, and the river changes its own shape. You don't grab a shovel and try to dig the river yourself.
Okay, so let's play this all the way out. Let's say we do everything we've talked about today.
Okay.
We do the brutal reality check of the silhouette allocation. We define our variables. We hunt down our shadows. We learn to strategically wield and yield. We build the chart. We fill in all 36 atomic fruits.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, we achieve the root. We become the writer. We become the athlete. What happens then? Are we just done?
Then you face the final danger of the system. You face the danger of rot.
Fruit rot.
Yes. Think about the physics of a habit. If put on running shoes immediately upon waking is your atomic fruit, and you do it perfectly every single day for 3 solid years.
At that point, it's basically instinct.
Exactly. It has crossed over into what psychologists call unconscious competence. You don't even think about it anymore.
Right.
So if you are still keeping that fruit on your chart and you're still checking off a little box every morning to congratulate yourself for putting on shoes,
You're kind of cheating the system.
you are. It becomes performative. It becomes what the author calls fake work. You are getting a cheap dopamine hit for something that currently costs your system 0 units of energy.
So the fruit has effectively rotted.
Mm.
It's no longer providing any actual nutritional value to your growth.
Exactly. And when the fruits rot, the chart has to die.
The chart has to die.
The chart must evolve. The entire ceiling of your current chart literally becomes the floor of your next chart. When a branch becomes effortless, you must retire it. You throw it out.
And that really is the final, ultimate provocation of this entire source material. The absolute end goal of drawing the root square chart is to throw it away.
That is the whole point. The map is not the territory. The map is simply a temporary tool used to navigate a complex territory until you intimately know the way yourself.
Right.
If you are still clutching the map and staring at it after you've already learned the terrain by heart, you aren't navigating anymore. You're just holding a piece of paper.
You become obsessed with the tool instead of the reality.
Exactly. The goal was never to have a pretty, perfectly optimized chart hanging on your wall to show off to your friends. The goal was to internalize the architecture so deeply on such a cellular level that you become the root, you become the physics.
That is simultaneously a terrifying and incredibly liberating thought. To spend all this time and rigorous mathematical energy building something specifically so you can destroy it and outgrow it.
It is the only way genuine growth actually happens. You have to build the cocoon in order to completely destroy the cocoon.
Well, this has been an incredible paradigm shift. So as we wrap up, here's our challenge to you, the listener. We have to ask you to draw out a massive 36 food chart today. That is a massive undertaking.
Yeah, please don't try to do that all today.
But we do want you to run a microdiagnostic.
Pick just one shadow variable in your life, one specific area where you constantly feel stuck or drained or inexplicably confused. Maybe it's a project at your career, maybe it's your physical fitness, maybe it's a specific relationship.
Just pick one and run a silhouette allocation on it, just for that one thing. Draw the 3 columns, current, necessary, optimal.
And be brutally honest with the numbers. If you find that the necessary column is fundamentally higher than the actual capacity you possess, stop beating yourself up. Stop calling it a moral failure or a lack of willpower. Identify it for what it truly is, a structural impossibility.
And once you see the math, ask yourself the hard questions. What variable do I actually need to rename? What invisible constraint, what delineator is secretly shaping my behavior?
Do the math, fix the physics, and then step back and see what emerges in the 4th quarter.
The root is waiting for you. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.